seeing Hyperlight. Yes. Can I get a thumbs up? Cool, thank you. All right, so welcome everyone to another Hyperlight community meeting. I think today should probably be a short community meeting. We can give people a couple of minutes back because we don't have all that many announcements or discussion items. But let's begin. So to start off, we just recently merged two PRs. One of them removes PE support. So that means that Hyperlight is now only supporting ELF binaries. This isn't Hyperlight Core. So that is all gone. And with that, we're also removing the support for the in-process driver. And those will all land with our O5 release scheduled for end of month. But if you're using latest Hyperlight main, you should be seeing those changes in. So I think that is it from the announcements, and we can get started with discussion items. Mark, I think you're the very first item.
Yeah, I just want to have a little bit of a discussion about some of the WSL runners work that I've been doing. There's not an ideal solution to this, and so I can briefly go over the two kind of paths forward that I saw and what I was pursuing, and I just wanted to make sure nobody had any objections to that too. But so how we host our current GitHub runners are internally to Microsoft, we have a service that we can pass an image to that and host, and it will generate runners from that image and manage them for us. For WSL, which I think there was desire to have tests, at least some testing running on in WSL instances because that seems to be a pretty popular developer scenario. We don't have the services that we use to provision our runners can't support installing the GitHub runner agents in WSL natively. So I think we have two options to get WSL runners running in our GitHub repository. The first option is to use that same service to provision Windows machines and then execute all and then script running and like all of the commands inside a WSL instance. I don't think that that's ideal because that would kind of have the either have the workflows diverge or lead to some really nasty just file stuff where we'd have to execute everything in WSL or like in a command prompt and then execute everything as WSL commands. The other alternative is to host our own runners, but install the GitHub runner agent in WSL. That does mean that we would potentially need to do a little bit more management for those runners versus the service that we have, but I think I have a solution for that too. So what I have mostly working now is I have an image that is that will run with Inpacker that will install Windows Server 2025 because that's 2025 is required for nested virtualization in WSL. Windows 10 or Windows Server 2022 do not support that. Just took me a little bit to find out. But so we'll set up a Windows Server 2025 instance and install Ubuntu in WSL, and then do provisioning in that, like do like add everything that we need, install Rust and all of that stuff in the WSL instance, and then have a task that will run as system when the images first boot that will go out, authenticate with a GitHub app to get a registration token, and then register that as the runner. Um, so and then wait for jobs to come. So my hope was that we could have an image that we can put in a VM scale set, and then every time the scale, like the instances come online, the machines would automatically register as GitHub runners. We can't really do that as part of the image build because the act of registering the runner in the image would mean that if we were to boot multiple instances of that runner, then they would collide and we wouldn't get multiple instant runner instances with that too. So I think at least from a management perspective, it's a little bit more complicated in the setup, but more like less hands off. I think it and I did verify that we can just add that into the matrix in our dep rust job, and everything just ran once that was set up. So we don't need to touch adjust files. We don't need to have custom targets to kind of tell it that it's in WSL. Um, do folks have any objections to that or opinions on that or any other suggestions that I could try to? Or if not, I'll probably just proceed with that and open up some PRs to get that running. I just wanted to kind of double check with everybody. No.
Sorry, Mark. Did you say 1ES runners won't work?
Yeah, so if we do the 1ES runners, they'll give us a Windows machine, but then we would have to script like update all of our workflows to execute whatever commands we wanted in the WSL instance.
Okay.
And I think that's the best that they can do. So that we could do that, but then we would either need a separate just file or a separate GitHub runner workflow that would run on
Okay.
Windows and then script against the WSL instance. And that's actually quite annoying because of um just line endings and things like that. What I had to do to get the scripts working reliably and it'd probably be easier if I had a pull request open for this, but um, it's available in a branch. In order to get things to be running reliably in WSL instance when scripted from the Windows command prompt or PowerShell command prompt, is write a batch file or a bash file and then like basically echo the bash file into the console and pipe that into the WSL instance to a file. And then after that's done, run DOS-T Unix on the file to make sure all of the line endings and everything is cleared up. And then at that point, we can run like WSL.exe, the distro name, and then execute the script. And doing that for every command we would want to do, like every just target, if needed, would I think not be ideal. So I hope from a management perspective, it says like we can just set up a scale set up a little bit of automation to scale it up and down depending on business hours, and then not need to do anything else.
Yep. I think that sounds good, Mark.
Okay, so yeah, I'm taking that silence as agreement, and we can reevaluate if needed.
Yeah, thanks for the investigation there.
Yeah.
A lot of pain points. Okay, up next in our discussion items, we have Doru with a demo on the crash dump feature. Doru, do you want to take over the screen share?
Yeah, sure. I'll start
All
sharing.
right, it's all yours.
Okay. Okay, so let me know when you see my screen.
I can see it.
Okay, so okay, what I'll show you.
I want to make the font a little bigger.
uh, you're seeing my VS Code, right?
Yeah, I'm seeing your views go. I mean, no big deal right now. If you ever get into code, I'm just saying you can
Oh yeah,
control
I
plus, and
will.
plus.
Yeah, I will zoom in. Okay, so what I want to show you is how the crash dump feature works. Uh, The first idea was to show you how it works on a sample we have in the repository. Then I thought that I can do something more, let's say, interesting. This is something that I've been working on for the past couple of days. So I took the demo that you presented at the KubeCon last year, Dan, and modified it to support debugging and crash dump features. So for anyone that doesn't know what this demo does, I'll explain shortly. So we have a host application that um, sets up an HTTP server, and people can
Could you
send
maybe zoom
requests.
in a little bit?
Yeah, sure. Is it better now?
Yeah, I think
That's better.
Yeah. Okay. So what this does is, as you can see, we have some routes here. These routes actually expose. So I'm going to here, hello world, for example. So we have this route that what actually does is it spawns up. It gets a sandbox from a pool and then tries executing a function from that sandbox to print a string. This application was meant to compare between warm startup and cold startup, and I thought that I can do this. I can use this in order to show the debugging features. Okay, so what I'll do, I set up a new terminal here. I will go to the demo main. Okay, so what we have here. So is this host application that I will start up providing the program feature. Okay, so what I did beside this was um, in the safety file, I added another route here besides the dereferral null pointer. I added a stack overflow. So when this path is hit, a sandbox will try to run inside the guest that will run this function, which actually produces a stack overflow. So I wanted to show that when this happens, a crash dump, a core dump file is created, and I can use that to inspect the state of the guest at the time of the crash. So what I will do, I will just hit this path, this route. So I'll use Perl. Okay, so as you can see, we got a message here that the core dump was created and the sandbox actually crashed. This is still work in progress. It doesn't have the necessary messages to point that out. So anything besides this, this is the only thing that is printed at the moment. So what I have now is I added some debug configurations to the repository in order to take this core dump and load it on this dev container. So I can show you the configuration here. So we have configurations for both LLDB and GDB, and you can use either of them. So for this example, I'll use GDB, for example. When I run it, it asks for the program that was used as a guest binary, which is the one that was printed there, and I will copy here the core dump file. And when I hit enter, it will start um, at the state that the guest was in at the time of the crash. So we can see that it crashed here in this function, and I can go back to the call stack, go and see what happened there. So we can see registers at the time of each call frame, and yeah, this is much it in terms of the how the crashdown feature works. What I can say more about it is I added to this repository, I did a dev container environment so that you can get a good out-of-the-box experience and not have to install every tool. And in order for this to work, I needed to update the guest and the host to use the latest. Actually, it's one of my branches that has this feature turned on, but it's version 4.0.4 for the Hyperlight. So it doesn't work with the version 1.0.1 that we had prior to this. Yeah, so this is pretty much it from me. Questions? Mm,
No questions from me, but I gotta say this is really awesome work, Thor.
yeah, thanks.
We have a
I
question from James now.
Oh yeah, sure. Go on.
Great stuff. Um, how does it get configured? Where's the configuration for all this set up so you can like
You mean
where
the
the stack
configuration
dump?
for the sandbox, or
No, more for like how you configure the where it dumps and when it dumps and all of that.
you cannot actually configure when. In order to activate this, to enable this, you need to, I'll show it now. You need to enable a feature on the Hyperlight host rate, the crash dump feature, in order for this to work. And this is all that you need. When you enable this, if a crash happens in the guest that is not handled by the Hyperlight library, it will just create a core dump.
Do you think we should allow for the host to define where they want the crash dump to go in terms of the directory?
I think that would be a nice to have feature because if you're in a production, let's say, scenario, then to dump everything in the temporary directory isn't the best experience. So yeah, that's a good point. I think I can add that feature.
Okay, this is great, by the way.
Yeah, thanks. I also added the debugging on this example, on this demo. So I had some feedback from Ralph, some initial feedback, and it seems to be going great. So I opened up a pull request on this, Dan. If you want to take a look, it would be
Yeah, I just
well
started
received.
this morning. I'll take a look at it.
Yeah, sure. Thanks.
James?
One more. So what happens if Hyperlight itself crashes? Do you also get a core dump? Not the
No,
guest particular.
no. This is only for the guest. So we have the state of the guest, we have the memory, we have the registers, everything, and we now just package it in an ELF file and just write it to the disk. What happens to the Hyperlight library is actually part of the host application. So it will just give you some error results that you need to handle.
Yeah, plus Hyperlight will never crash because we only write perfect code.
Yeah.
Good answer.
Yeah, David?
David.
So your guidance for folks who would be using Hyperlight and maybe had a crash would be to take a crash dump of the process in which it's hosted.
I didn't understand that, David. Can you go
Absolutely,
again?
yeah. So you, we just cemented the idea that this is for guests. This is
Mhm.
for a crash dump for the guest, so that we can understand what was going on in the guest when it inevitably crashed. Then James brought up well, does this have any of the host information, or could you get a crash dump from the host? And this does not include host crash dump in case the host were to crash. So in that case, what kind of guidance would you provide people who are building applications that use Hyperlight as a library and need to debug it after a crash?
In terms of guidance, what I would do, I would advise on actually debugging the host application, and at the same time, the one of the guests that is crashing, for example. So in this way, you can orchestrate both the host and the guest at the same time. For example, you start with your host, you go on through the instructions, and you have a function call to the guest. And that function call, when you skip over it, it will just hang waiting for you debugging the guest binary. And at that time, you can go through the guest binary and figure out what you want there. And when it returns, it will trigger you to go back to the host application debugging and look through it. We don't have something that works at runtime for now. So this is something like, well, I noticed that a crash happens when I do something. Let's go in deeper and see how we can figure out what happens. And that's when you enable debugging and start looking through it.
I think I'd like to preface that a little bit more too. Um, folks are probably not going to be debugging that in production, right?
Yeah.
So, and some of the builds may be stripped of symbols, and so I think it would be wise for us to be able to advise people on how they would be able to debug, problems like this, or problems generally. Like if the guest blows up, what do you do? Okay, if the host blows up, what are you doing? Just very simple. Here's kind of the process for sorting out, why your thing blew up.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Okay. We can do that. One of the things that I've been looking at is stripping the binaries, the symbols from the binaries, and being able to move them independent of the binary, and just when you want to see where the actual crash happened, you just use the symbols as a separate file to show you where it happened. But the binary should be stripped, ideally. So in production, you won't have big binaries. Yeah, Simon.
Yeah, I'm wondering if, based on that conversation, we should have an option that also we can dump the host process when a crash occurs in the guest, so you have both the host and the guest, and have it as a thing that's turned off by default. I don't know. I'm just throwing ideas around.
That could be done a lot simpler, easier than this guest dumping. So yeah, we have the operating system at our disposal, so we can use it to dump the host application.
I don't think it's something, if we do it, I don't think it's something we should do by default, but if we give folks the option to do that, then maybe that helps. I don't know. Depends, see what other people think.
I think we can ask some of the users about it, what they think, if it's helpful, something like that. Yeah, James?
Is there any compatibility things to consider? Like if it gets dumped on 0.5 and you're running on 0.4, will you still be able to debug it? Or is there any kind of checks in there that would make sure that you're not running into troubles while you're debugging? Or is that not an issue? I'm not sure.
So I haven't thought about that, but out of the top of my mind, I can say that as long as we have this feature enabled in Hyperlight and you had a dump created by Hyperlight, then it should be loadable in GDB. So that means starting, I hope from 0.5 release, we should have that ready in everything later. In terms of compatibility, but from a different angle, this is the Windows versus Linux support. So in terms of our guests, we don't actually care where they are run. We have the difference in hypervisor, but the way the way we store the memory internally, it's kind of the same. But the ELF file produced, the core dump, is the same for each platform for Windows and Linux. But you would need GDB to actually load it. And that means running GDB on Windows, for which you usually need some kind of a compiler or Cygwin or something like that. Yeah, Simon?
You're muted.
I thought I'd not muted myself again. We did discover when we were looking at this that you do need a minimum version of GDB to do that. I think we worked out if you had 15 and above, it worked, but you could create a dump on, say, Ubuntu 2004 and load it in Ubuntu 2404 as long as you had the right version of GDB, and vice versa as well. On the Windows thing, WinDBG does support remote GDB debugging, but the last time I tried with this feature, something went wrong in the handshake between WinDBG's debug support and our GDB stub, and I wasn't able to figure out what that thing was. So if somebody wants a nice task, go try this out with WinDBG and the remote GDB support and see if you can get it to work.
All right. So if we have no more questions, want to be cognizant of our time here. We have about 8 minutes remaining. And Simon, I think you're the next discussion item, so I'll let you take over.
Yeah, I just added an item about what do we want to do in terms of allowing people who aren't maintainers to run GitHub Actions from forks. Because right now we have to approve them. There are a couple of options in GitHub. You can let it be a free-for-all, which is probably a bad idea. You can give somebody permission after if my memory serves me right, after the first contribution. And there's some other option, but they all come with upsides and downsides, I suppose. I know that people have used the middle option to get access to repos through doc updates and then done all sorts of nefarious things, having the ability to run GitHub Actions. So I think it's something we should think about, but I'm not sure what the right answer is. So I don't know whether there's got any opinions on that.
I mean, I think we can have it so that org members don't need to run tests, and that is a little bit, or don't can run the tests, and that is a little bit more secure than the first contribution. But I think we probably should lay out a path for other folks to become maintainer without maintainers without being admins for this, to get it so that after there's a couple or some consistent contributions, then their pull requests can run all of the CI automatically. I'm a little bit hesitant to have it be the free-for-all, like you said, and I don't know if at this point it's being it's like it's being if we're not being responsive enough to trigger the CI initially for some of these initial contributions.
What triggered this thought was James has put a PR into Hyperlight Wasm, and James is not in the group that has right access. So this means
Yeah.
we have to manually run the PR validation. And
James has
of course,
contributed to a lot of open source projects. Did you think
yeah,
how do you feel about?
I can
Yeah.
solve the problem for James, right, really easily. But
Yeah.
it's not James that I'm thinking about. It's like the
Yeah.
general case. So I think what you're suggesting is that we create another team and then over time add people to that.
I think so. I don't. Yeah, I mean that's another option that initially sounds more favorable to me versus the free for all thing and makes it a little bit easier. Yeah, James, you want to go ahead since
It needs some sort of contributor ladder for the CNCF anyways.
Okay.
I think to just as you move through the CNCF like ladder of project
possibly out of sandbox
yeah
state,
out of sandbox.
And, yeah.
And so thinking about how you're going to accomplish that, I think Container D does the like Kubernetes has a way to like once you join the org, it runs your tests automatically. And Container D does something similar, but like I mean, I've contributed a bunch to Container D, and I still have to get a second set of tests approved because I'm not like a contributor. I'm not in the contributor group. But they do like run like a blanket 3 or 4 linters and that type of stuff just to give you feedback. But then somebody just has to come by and give me an okay. But so I think there's different approaches, but probably think about it within the scope of the CNCF like onboarding.
Okay, thanks. That's useful.
So what is the reason for this? Do we want people to get some feedback on their work prior to opening the pull request or something like that?
Yeah, I mean, as things stand, if you submit a PR and you're not part of the maintainers group, then the PR validation does not run.
So I had this problem with the elf core crate and the PR that I'm waiting for review. And the same is the same for me. I need approval to run the GitHub Actions, and I've been using the ACT tool. It's a tool written by someone on GitHub that actually runs it locally. So I've been running all the workflows locally so that I can get some feedback. So maybe this is one of the solutions we have, something like a workflow that is runnable on Ubuntu, for example. And yeah, that would give you something like.
Okay, yeah, we should look at that. What's the tool called?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'll send
we
the
should have
link.
like a quick like and a contributing guide. I don't know if we have this, but like the like during setup, just like have the just targets that we kind of consider like smoke tests that are very easy, like for people to run to by themselves. Just be pretty clear.
One thing I added recently to our just file was a test like CI rule, which runs the test like Rust test and so forth, similar to how CI would. And that's what I've been using as validation before sending in a PR. Also, checking Clippy is usually good, both debug and release modes. And those usually help to have your PR go to.
2 minutes too, by the way, just time check.
Yep.
Okay, so it sounds like we should start with some docs.
Good idea. Yeah, Jorge, you have 1 minute.
Yeah.
I would like to understand the concern is like you can steal secrets from CI, right? Or some like some information from CI. What if we allow running everything but a workflow that contains secrets? Like the workflow, wherever we need secrets, we put it in a different workflow, and that one.
Yeah, that means we have to be vigilant. We have to be vigilant, and don't we, that we don't accidentally break that rule, which is hard to do.
Yeah, I think that's kind of what James was saying, like how containerd is. I think there's some like workflows that can just do linters that can run on probably generic the GitHub runners and then other workflows. I think it might be a little bit
Well,
trickier for ours because all of our runners are self-hosted runners. So even if there's a workflow that doesn't require secrets, they could potentially get
right,
some
folks. We
thing.
have less than a minute, so we'll probably be abruptly cut soon. We can
Yeah.
maybe continue on Slack.
Yeah.
Thank you all for coming.
Yep.